Kevin. My name is Jason B. I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I'm a former U.S. Marine, and like you, I am also a disabled veteran. I've been watching your channel now for a little over 3 years. Initially, it was the strange happenings at your woodpile and the throwing of walnuts against your house, and your helping of the old man who lives on the next ridge up from you split firewood that drew me to your channel. What has kept me coming back is your relatability as a person and your gifts as a storyteller. All of this combined has gotten me to get back into writing myself and created within me a desire to share my stories. Now I want to share one with you and your YouTube family. I grew up in a lower income area of eastern North Carolina, Lumberton, and spent most of my childhood outside with my 2 brothers. My family, not having a lot of money, was hardworking, loving, taught to respect others, and we had instilled within us a healthy respect for the paranormal, superstitious ideas, and of course, a respect for our local lores and urban legends. As a child, I had my personal experiences with ghosts and the paranormal, but it was my up-close experience with the swamp man that changed everything. My grandma loved to eat squirrel, and on several occasions, she sent me, when I was between the ages of 8 and 10, and a cousin of mine along with me, out in the mornings to get her a couple or 4 squirrels for either lunch or dinner. When we'd go hunting, we were always told to watch out for the swamp man. No matter what, do not go into his area. The swamp man's area started near a mound next to the Lumber River, and it stretched out across the marshes. One summer morning, my grandma said, "Jay, I want some squirrels. Can you go get me some?" I turned to her and I said, "Sure, Grandma." My grandma had enlisted my brothers and one of my cousins to help her pick butter beans in the garden. So on this day, I was out in the woods hunting for squirrels on my own. I'd done this several times, and it was nothing new to me. I grabbed my .410 pump shotgun and I started the trek across the tobacco field to the tree line. On my walk, I could hear the sounds of the bugs. I could feel the heat, even at 8 a.m. That summer, I remember, was so hot, and it didn't rain much. Everything was just dry and dusty. I got to the tree line where I could usually see squirrels, but there wasn't a single one in sight. And strangely enough, there were no sounds. This meant I had to go inside the tree line, into the forest, where I knew I could find some squirrels near the river, so I did just that. And when I got to my spot, I sat down to wait. But just like before I'd entered the tree line, there was nothing. No sounds, no squirrels, zilch. With the lack of rain, the river was low, and it could be easily crossed, with the deepest part being only 3 or 4 feet deep. There was a rope swing on a tree at a favorite swimming hole, but with the water being so low due to the drought-like conditions, we could not use it safely. I walked down to the bank to walk, as it was easier traveling than within the woods. After a few minutes, I heard the sound of squirrels running in the trees, so I changed directions, now heading up towards the woods and towards the sounds of the squirrels in the trees. But something seemed different. I could see what looked like a sandbar in the marsh I was now heading toward. I could still hear squirrels. They were close to the sandbar, so I got into position and ready to shoot. I saw the squirrels I'd heard, and once they stopped moving, I shot, and with 2 shots, I'd bagged 2 squirrels. They'd fallen down into some thick brush around the tree they'd been in. I moved to get them, but I found it difficult, as one had fallen on top of the brush and the other through the brush, landing on the sandy floor underneath it. I sat my shotgun down to grab a stick to knock off the closest one, the one on top of the brush, and I got him after a few tries. The second one was in a more difficult position for me to get. It was deep underneath the brush. I got on all fours and I could see him, but he was about 20 yards deep inside the brush. I knew if I just crawled, I could get him, so it wasn't a big deal. So I started my crawl, and I nearly immediately got a whiff of a very strong smell. It was an odor that I would describe as smelling something like a combination of mud and decomposing leaves. I got about 5 yards into the brush, and then I could hear movement. My first thought was that I was hearing a wild pig, and I knew if that's what it was, I needed to get my shotgun and get out of there. But as I listened again, it sounded different, heavier, and that smell. I got within a few yards of the squirrel, and I remember thinking, get this thing and get out of here. It was still silent, except for the noise I was making, and I stopped to look around and figure my way out to exit. I looked back up at the squirrel, and I noticed something behind the brush moving. The next thing I know, I see a muddy, dark-skinned, hairy hand reaching out and grabbing the squirrel, and then it was gone. I was stunned, scared, and I knew I had to get out of there. I crawled out as fast as I could, grabbing my gun the moment I was out of the brush. When I stood up and turned back, I could see a face. It wasn't human, but at the same time, it was. The next thing I know, I hear grunts and crunching as whatever this thing was began eating the squirrel, raw and undressed. At first, I couldn't move because my knees felt like jelly. When I was finally able to begin running, this thing, this whatever it was, turned its head and looked at me. It made another grunt and ran off. At the same time, I was running in the opposite direction back towards Grandma's. As I ran, I saw a broom sticking up out of the ground. I ran as hard and as fast as I could to get to it. This was the marker at a mound where I knew we were not supposed to go past, but I had entered the swamp man's domain. Even though I knew there was nothing chasing me now, I continued running all the way home until I got back to Grandma. When I got back, she looked at me and said with a laugh, "Well, there goes my dinner." She gave me a quick hug, told me to get some water and get to help with the others with the beans. On the walk to get the water, she told me I was lucky to have seen what I had and that I'd learned a hard lesson to be aware of my surroundings and respect everything in the woods and the swamp. Kevin, I hope you enjoy this story. And thanks for being you, and thanks for all that you do. If you have any advice for a new writer, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks again, Jason B., Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Jason, with a story like this, my advice to you would be, keep on writing your stories, brother. Keep on writing your stories. And above all else, beware the swamp man of North Carolina.